Greetings, I'm the Reverend Karyn Richards-Kuan, the senior pastor here at the First United Methodist Church of Portland. This past Sunday, it was our intention to share the state of the church with you. Now, if you were here in worship on Sunday, you'll know that we had about a third of our power, which didn't quite include all of our AV system, certainly did not include our air conditioning, and so it was difficult for most folks to understand or to hear what we were saying. So we are taking the opportunity to share this with you again, with a couple different bonus facts as well. For the past year, I have listened, prayed, and pondered with you, listening for your voice to reflect that back to you. I'll share that today and also provide a picture of where we've been, where we are now, and those signposts that I see up ahead for where I see us going. We'll start with a wider lens, just to consider the state of the church at the global and at the annual conference or the regional level. And then we'll zoom in and we'll look at just a few different numbers from our congregation. And we'll come back out just a little bit to conclude with the unfolding imagination of our congregation. The long and the short of it is that we have finally made it to a season of renewal. And we've got some places to go. So I'm thrilled to share with you what we have next. Now, if you have been a part of the United Methodist Church for any time at all, you may know that we've been in somewhat of a kerfuffle for the past few decades. For several years, the United Methodist Church has been in limbo, exacerbated by the pandemic, as most things have been. While we may have previously anticipated a true church split over the inclusion of LGBTQ folks, this is no longer the road ahead. Churches are choosing to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church. This is very true. There is a provision that allows churches to leave with their property if they meet certain thresholds. The provision expires at the end of this year in 2023, and so it was this last year of annual conferences and the annual conference season that saw the vast majority of disaffiliations approved by their annual conferences. Most, but not all, disaffiliating churches have a conservative theology that does not celebrate and honor the dignity and worth and belovedness of queer folks. Now, we in the United Methodist Church, we're part of a global denomination, but the numbers that I'll share with you in just a moment are related just to the churches in the United States, so that's important to remember. As of today, 6,181 churches in the United States have chosen to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church. Many, though not all, again, have chosen to affiliate with a new denomination called the Global Methodist Church, or the GMC, which you may have heard of. But here's what's important to me, and what I would like to stick with you as well. 80% of the United Methodist churches in the United States have chosen to be United Methodist. 80%, a huge majority. In areas where there have been large numbers of churches that have left the denomination, members from those churches who wanted to remain United Methodist have begun to form new faith communities in the United Methodist expression in their neighborhood where they are. In my home conference, the Texas Annual Conference alone, they have planted nearly a dozen churches just this year. My status as someone serving on loan with this congregation requires me to attend both the Texas Annual Conference and the Oregon-Idaho Annual Conference. It is a lot to track two totally different structures and systems. It's all United Methodist, but everyone functions quite differently across conferences. But it is an excellent way to stay grounded and to remain in the breadth and the depth of our denomination and not just siloed in the politics of one conference. Now, each of these conferences, they are on the opposite ends of the spectrum in more than one way. So it has been really, really interesting for me to get to participate in both. Still, at both of these gatherings, both here in Oregon, Idaho, and in Texas, there was a palpable spirit of renewal and forward motion. the refrain on everyone's lips. It's a new day. It is a new day. Thank our God, it is a new day. Never have I experienced an annual conference season filled with so much grief and with so much hope. One of the presentations, parts of the annual conference that has continued to stick with me was a presentation by Dr. Ashley Bogan. She's the General Secretary of our denomination's General Commission on Archives and History. And from a deep study of our history, Dr. Bogan names that the time is now. The time is now. We have finally made it to this threshold moment where we have more opportunity than ever to reclaim and to reshape who we are as a people called Methodist. She reminds us that ours is a history of bending the rules, of being ridiculed, and doing the unthinkable, all in order to spread the love of God to as many people as possible. This is our heritage, our history. This is our legacy as Methodists. She recounts John Wesley's famous moment of what I like to think of as missional resignation. John Wesley was a very structured man, a very structured priest with a structured idea of proper Christian community and liturgy. And the evolving circumstances of the Methodist movement didn't let him stay in that box. One such moment saw the question of proper preaching, which for Wesley was done in a proper church with a proper pulpit. The practice of field preaching, or going to where the people were, it did not qualify as quite in order. 2023 is not that different from Wesley's day, Dr. Bogan shared with us. Many of the people in the 18th century were nones and dones when it came to association with the church. They were tired of the institutional church because it didn't meet their everyday needs and it refused to change in order to do so. The parish system, which had functioned reasonably well for centuries, it broke down after many years of unprecedented changes. Their changes were a result of the Industrial Revolution. Now, Wesley was not one to act without meticulous thought and consideration. When his frenemy, George Whitefield, pushed him to see the changing reality of the church and the good that could come from a change of pace, Wesley made the choice to do ministry far outside what was comfortable for him. Not only outside of the church walls, but also far outside his own neighborhood, his own parish. It was this step, and many more like it, that broadened the Methodist witness through the commitment to be a church that shows its love through its actions, much to the critique of their contemporaries. Dr. Bogan insists that this is the heritage that we build upon as United Methodists today. We must set the stage for the United Methodist Church 100 years from now, she implores, lest future generations think they had a shot in 2023, if only they'd taken it. No, instead, in 100 years, the reflections can sound like, oh my goodness, during a global pandemic, during disaffiliation, during warfare, climate change, economic injustice, a global racial reckoning. In the midst of all of this, those United Methodists, they sought to be new, to be different. Those United Methodists set the stage for us to continue to reach beyond the walls of the church and embrace those on the margins. On the lines of this forward momentum, Bishop Cedric also led us to see who we might embrace on our journey as an annual conference and as a local church through a new Episcopal initiative. Now, I won't get into that too deeply because you will get to hear this for yourself. We're pleased to share that Bishop Cedric will preach here at First Church on September 10th for our church's 175th celebration and our annual rally day. This spirit of renewal and a forward motion, it's not just present in the global church or at the annual conference level. It's present here with you at First Church. As I have watched you come back from the pandemic, many have marveled to me about this this spark of energy that you tell me you haven't experienced here in years. Now, I want to share with you some of the different pieces that go into that spark of energy. Just a few metrics, not too many numbers, and then also some stories of how things have transitioned and changed. I won't get too much into the finances that we have right now because the financial report is sent out every quarter, and so you have full access to that. If you don't, we can always help you figure out how to access each quarter's report through the newsletter. In the near future, one thing that we hope to share is a full accounting of both our operating and our building expenses and income. Because the operating budget, it really only tells half the story, but that is not for today. As I shared last week, we find ourselves in the strongest financial position that we have had for several years. There's still a lot of work to do, but we've made really good progress. As I share just a few metrics with you, my hope is that in each of these numbers, you can call to mind the people that each number represents. We've got a lot of folks who call First Church home. We have 616 members, 39 constituents who are those who are deeply embedded in the life of the church but choose not to be members. And we have 162 guests. We have 62 active children and youth this past year. Our in-person average worship attendance sits at around 179. Our online average worship attendance is about 177 households, or an educated guesstimate of 302 people. This is not a perfect number, and there are ways that we can get a better online attendance average, which we're working toward. We have 48 choir members, with 35 singing regularly with us each Sunday. We have 16 new adult members and 7 new pre-members, which are the family members of those who have joined. We've also started or accomplished a number of transitions. From top to bottom and side to side, we have transitioned 12 staff in the last year. 12. Our SPRC has been very, very busy. We have migrated from a church database software that we have used for literal decades, the same software. We've migrated to a digital phone system. We've relaunched an office volunteer program and now have 10 volunteers staffing the office from day to day, every single weekday. We've launched a Sunday school class, a young men's group, and seasonal pastoral Bible studies. We've transitioned away from pre-packaged communion, and most days we have transitioned to having air conditioning in the offices. The church has demonstrated a growing willingness in all of this time to take your authority, to discern what has worked well in the past, what is ours to do now at the present moment, and what a faithful future might look like. Through over a dozen meet and greets, one-on-ones, lunches, dinners, coffees, hallway conversations, and many, many messages and phone calls. Amidst all of these changes and more, there are 3 focuses that have emerged: connection, inclusion, and mission through housing. These can be considered separately, for sure, but the threads connecting them are plentiful. The first, this is a church who wants to connect around the table, the Bible study table, the fellowship table, the dinner table. There's a yearning amongst you to reconnect after years of disconnection, or to connect for the first time at all. This is especially present for folks who have started coming to First Church within the last 5 years, which is many of you. You've told me that you care not only about the tables where you will eat, but also want others to be able to connect around tables of healthy food, no matter their financial position. It's this desire that fuels our support to host Lift Up's Preston Pantry. The Lift Up vision is of a Portland where everyone has access to healthy food and opportunities to connect with others. In this last year, we have had 12,000 visits to the pantry, with over 2,500 unique individuals. 12,000 visits to the pantry. To support your focus on connection and this very clear need, I've opened the conversation with the Lift Up Executive Director, Stephanie Barr, to examine how we might be able to deepen our partnership and to participate even more in the connections that Lift Up facilitates around food. The second theme that has emerged is that this is a church who cares about the inclusion of all ages and stages of life. Intergenerational relationships and a keen eye toward ministry with all generations was expressed to me several times in my conversations with you. We've got a great start on this through those who engage our family ministry and with 4 intergenerational service projects, which many of you have chosen to participate in. As I shared several weeks ago, you also want to be louder and more transparent in your inclusion, so that there's no question of who this congregation desires to love, to support, and to surround with compassion. For you, as a congregation, you've told me that inclusion of families and inclusion of LGBTQ folks are priorities that go hand in hand with one another. One cannot be accomplished without the other at this church. There are 2 task forces that will consider immediate work toward greater inclusion. This is necessary foundation work for us to build this beautiful frame of a thriving, inclusive family ministry that's seamlessly joined together with the intergenerational life of our church. One I announced this past week, which is the Gracious Welcome Task Force. This will identify strategies to support every area of First Church to live into a gracious welcome that prioritizes those who are experiencing houselessness, mental illness, those who are young or who are otherwise vulnerable. More information about this task force is available in the email sent with this video. The other is still finding its feet and exploring which church groups to work with in order to determine scope, but it'll essentially determine the large and the small ways to communicate to all who are near or around our church that we are an inclusive congregation of all races, abilities, ages, classes, gender identities, and sexual orientations. This could take a number of directions, from more clear and transparent outdoor signage to working with the trustees for a study of where our sidewalks might be unsafe for those who use a wheelchair or a walker. One thing that I've noticed about you all that continues to surprise and delight me is how warm and welcoming you are, and how warm and welcoming you can be to folks who walk into our building each week. It has been inspiring to me to hear your stories and to hear how you talk about what it means for you to notice and to see each person who comes to church. And so I am so grateful that you are looking at not only how you can help folks to be seen and welcomed when you're physically present, but also in how our policies and how our space are prepared. The building and how we use it speaks volumes to who we plan to include in our ministry and in the life of the church. And this brings me to the last focus that has emerged. This is a church who has said yes to mission through housing. Whether about the family shelter, the landing, about affordable housing, or any other housing-related piece, these conversations have been the deepest. I have learned from you that housing is a central part of our legacy here at First Church. We have said yes to housing for over 30 years, and it has always been hard. On the earlier side of that legacy, Dick and Olive Pomeroy sat in meeting after meeting, conversation after conversation, study and action, group after group, all because they knew that there were people around them that didn't have a safe place to go at night. Once the family shelter got off the ground in its initial iterations, the congregation continued to circle around it through advocacy, volunteering, taking the night shift and sleeping on cots in our basement gym, through making meals, through fundraising. The shelter became a 501c3 and eventually expanded their operation, moving out of the four walls of our gym and into a new space where they can serve even more families under their new name, Path Home. Members of this congregation continue to be involved with Path Home by serving on their board, with their financial generosity, and through their community support. Members like Dick and Mary Segura volunteer at Path Home nearly every week. Soon after the family shelter moved its location, Scott Robeson helped us realize that there are college students at PSU who don't have safe homes to go to at night. And so, the landing moved into the space that the family shelter left. As we said this past month, when we celebrated the work that the landing has done and also acknowledged its closure, the landing provided an incredible place of safety in an impossible time. Even today, as we're recovering from the closing of the landing, we are maintaining our yes to housing through the use of the church apartment, securing a much-needed home for those in our community. The yes that we say today and that we say tomorrow, they will be different because our congregation and our city are different. Even between the family shelter and the landing, the second shelter simply didn't benefit from the volunteer base of the first, nor did it have the financial base that Path Home continues to have. Things are different. We're preaching in new fields. Though our response may look different, the need remains. 56,000 Portlanders don't have a stable and safe place to call home. One way that we can say yes to housing amidst this great need is to rekindle an active relationship with Path Home as a key partner of our church. This is an avenue that I've begun to explore with their executive director and with certain members of their board. Another of the many ways to explore our yes to housing is through the work that the Land and Housing Circle has done to learn more about the possibility of affordable housing around our campus. The group, through a feasibility study that many of you have heard about, the group has learned that the property and the resources available suggest that there are possibilities, some of which feel more feasible than others. And so alongside the congregation, they're going to continue to learn more about the repercussions, the impact, and the benefit of each of these options. To stay up to date on their work or to get involved yourself, there's an information and engagement webpage on our website that will also link with the video. If you want to see, or if you do see, and you want to work on other ways that First Church can say yes to housing in a fruitful and a faithful way, today is the day to explore that. The need is so great that the ways to say yes to housing are manifold. Yes to connection, yes to inclusion, and yes to mission through housing. It's not a 5-year plan. It's not a mandate. It's just a reflection back to you of what I've witnessed in you, a snapshot of the path I see ahead. As a community, we are feeling our way through the third stanza of a beautiful song. A tricky song, not one to sight read, but a beautiful one. It's a song about finding home as the people of God. A home where we can be together, where we can be our whole selves, not just our best selves or our normative selves, hopefully not only our worst selves, but our whole selves. The song's musical and lyrical themes come from ages of faithful folks who have come before us, setting the stage for us to embrace those in and outside of our walls. This is a song that changes with every person who comes alongside us. So no matter how long you have been singing that song, whether for over 1 week or over 50 years, your voice in it matters. I've spent the last year listening for that voice, listening for the melodies and the dynamics, the themes where you take a breath or a pause or where you have a few bars of rest. Listening to those who are singing strong and listening for those who, like me, are still finding the notes. So it is my prayer as we move forward into this next year together that we might find our voices together, and by God's grace, that we might be able to sing in harmony. In the name of the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sustainer. Amen.